This episode of the Commercial Real Estate Investor Podcast is brought to you by my CRE Accelerator mastermind, where you'll get access to my step-by-step investment blueprint, essentially a library of resources on how to invest in commercial real estate. You'll get connected to a supportive community of other commercial real estate investors that are doing projects just like you. You'll get personalized coaching and feedback from me every step of the way. Go to www.crecentral.com to learn more. Welcome back to the Commercial Real Estate Investor Podcast. Today, we're going to be diving into a little bit more on flex space, also known as small bay industrial. A lot of you all are very interested in that topic. And I found a Reddit thread today that asks a bunch of good questions about demand and where to find these types of deals, what to do about it. So I figured, hey, let's dive into that on office hours this week and cover that because it's very topical for what you guys are interested in. This is Office Hours, where we go live every Tuesday morning, 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, and answer your questions around commercial real estate. So whether you're in development, brokerage, investment, doesn't matter. Jump in, ask your questions in the live chat. Happy to jump over to that. Coach LAX is saying here, what's going on, Coach? Glad to see you here in the chat. So catching you guys up on what I've been up to. Just got back from Mexico this past weekend. I was out there for a buddy's wedding. Had a great time. As an entrepreneur, it's tough to not work. So I was definitely taking calls and working while we were in Cancun, which was a good time. We had some great weather. Nice to be back in Nashville though. We've got some self-storage going on out in Chattanooga. We're so close to getting that done. We're now at the point where the doors are finally installed on the self-storage facility. We've got the roll-up doors going in. For the most part, we're still waiting on EPB to get out there and actually install our power so we can turn all the lights on. But outside of that, the final item, this is so frustrating for an entire development like that to be held up on, is getting the signage approved by the city. We've been trying for the last 2-3 months to get the signage approved, and it's not going to go before the city until December 29th. And then they'll vote on it in January, and I guess it gets approved in February. That's nuts. Like, what a process to just get your signage approved, that it has to go through all of that. And it's because there's actually they messed up the zoning. There's no signage in that zoning or no signage standards or requirements, whatever you want to say it. So they have to basically specially decide on signage for us, which is pretty insane. Kevin is saying here, present. Good to see you, Kevin. Thanks for jumping in. All right, guys, let's go ahead and jump into this article for today. I think this one's pretty interesting, and let's have a conversation around flex space. So y'all are all very familiar with the term flex space. It's also colloquially called small bay industrial, right? So small bay because they're small bays. We get very creative with our terminology in commercial real estate. So this thread is saying, is anyone else seeing weirdly strong demand for small bay industrial right now? I've worked in commercial real estate for a few years, and something weird has been happening in my area recently. Every small bay industrial space, 2,000 to 6,000 square feet, is being snatched up practically fast. Tenants are lined up for it regardless of whether it is old, in need of repair, or in a meh location. I used to think of this as the drowsy middle ground between flex and big box, but lately it feels like the tightest part of the whole industrial inventory. So they're actually differentiating between small bay and flex. In my opinion, they're really the same thing. I'd be curious to see what they would consider to be flex if this is not considered flex. Now, it could just be that these are pure warehouses, right? If it's just 2,000 to 6,000 square feet of warehouse space and there's no office, then yeah, I would say that's not really flex, right? That would just be small bay industrial. It's kind of like saying, every simile is a metaphor, but not every metaphor is a simile, right? All flex spaces are small bay industrial, but maybe there's some small bay industrial that isn't quite flex space. But most of these spaces, sub 6,000 square feet, really, they're pretty flexible in the directions that you can take with them, right? Ted, good morning, my friend. Good to see you in here. So, when it comes to, flex, look, what's driving the demand here? Why is this happening? Well, let me take you back to the 2010s. All right, Amazon comes up, and starts really crushing it on the e-commerce side. They institute the free shipping and next day shipping, right? And so that completely changes the chain of logistics that we have when it comes to delivering retail goods, right? So, and maybe it was happening in the 2000 odds, but it really started to catch fire in the teens, because that's when you started seeing retail really struggle with competing against Amazon. What Amazon started to do was put these distribution facilities near all of these cities so that they could keep the most ordered goods in those warehouses, so that they could actually accommodate next day or 2-day delivery, right? Now, what that meant, if you start counting how many cities there are in America, or at least the major ones where you would want to have a distribution hub every 2 hours, maybe every 4 hours, maybe, that's a lot of big warehouses that are all of a sudden needed across the country. And so a lot of industrial developers actually started developing that instead, right? They no longer wanted to focus on the smaller things because now they have really big clients. It's kind of like how, when you find a really good commercial contractor that does great tenant build outs, but they're too good at it. And so they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So, you kind of have this void in the tenant build out space in commercial real estate all the time. Anyway, you have that, right? So the industrial developers are now starting to focus exclusively on these bigger and bigger deals. Simultaneously, much of the flex product, like the small bay industrial product that we have in a lot of our cities, is very close to the urban core, especially in the southeastern United States, where most people left the downtown area and industrial just kind of filled in, right, the gaps. So now you have this flight back to the urban core. Well, when that happens, you start having higher and better uses than single-story small bay industrial. Now that space can become a 3 or 4 story indoor climate-controlled self-storage facility. Or you can upzone it and go for apartments, office space, a hotel, whatever, anything that is going to be a higher and better use than flex industrial or small bay, which is a lot of uses, if we're being honest with ourselves. And so while you had developers no longer focusing on building this product, you have other developers that are actually tearing down this product. So you have this massive shortage of inventory, and those businesses haven't gone anywhere. There's still furniture making shops. There's still, think of all your blue collars, electricians, plumbers, HVAC technicians. I've seen podcast studios set up in flex space. I've seen, pickleball facilities go into flex space, car detailing, all sorts of really interesting things can utilize flex space. And so that demand just continues to grow because there's actually now a shortage of supply, right? So that's really why the demand is so strong. And I'll get back to this thread here in a second. I want to see what y'all are dropping in the chat. Robert's saying good morning. Good morning, Robert. Good to see you here, man. Castrol, looking to make the jump from single family, small multifamily to commercial and have 2 properties I'm very interested in. What is the agent situation in commercial? Do I need to find one? So Castrol, that's a great question. And also kudos to you for making the leap. You want to do anything you can to get out of single family and small multifamily. So yes, ideally what you'll want to do is find a great commercial real estate broker that can represent you and walk you through the process. You're not going to pay them anything. The seller will pay their commissions, and good sellers, like I will actually even encourage our tenants sometimes when we're leasing commercial real estate to go out and get a broker, because that broker will help them walk them through the process so that I don't have to do it. Makes my life substantially easier, right? And it makes sure that we actually get a deal done that's probably going to work out for everybody. There's some people that will say, oh, well, I'd rather save the 3% and, not, deal with a broker on the other side. Well, here's the problem with that. If you get a tenant that doesn't understand the lease that they're signing and, 2 years into it, they stop paying you rent, or their business doesn't work, or the HVAC unit goes out and they don't want to pay for it, even though they've signed an agreement that says they're going to pay for it, that's going to be a big problem, right? If you have to go into a lawsuit, I guarantee you it's going to cost you more than the 3% in commissions would. If that tenant doesn't pay you for, I don't know, what is it, a couple of months of rent, then you should have just paid the 3%. I mean, let's see, if you miss 2 months out of 60 months, that's on a 5-year lease, that's 3.33%. So if you're unable to collect less than 2 months of rent, you should have just paid the 3% commissions. So always worth it. They can walk you through the process, especially when you're getting into a newer side of the business. Always great to have a professional walk you through it. Michael is saying good morning from New York. Good to see you, Michael. And don't forget the likes. Appreciate that, man. All right, let's get back into Flex. So Reaver's saying, I own 4 acres of light industrial land with 12,000 vehicles per day. How do I assess demand for small bay industrial space? The funny thing is, like, the demand's probably already there. You don't even need to do like some crazy study for it. I mean, what I do, like if you've got 4 acres of light industrial land, what I would do is I would just build a 10,000 square foot building. One, plan it out in 4 phases. You typically build a 10,000 square foot building per acre. That's the easiest thing to do. It's going to depend on your municipality. Why is it 10,000 square feet, Tyler? Well, a couple of reasons. One, most municipalities will have sprinkler, like fire and life safety sprinkler restrictions at a certain square footage. For most municipalities, that seems to be around 10,000 square feet. Anything bigger than that, you have to fully sprinkler the building. Well, that's like $150,000 right off the bat. It's going to be at least 10 to 15% of addition to your construction budget. You just don't want to do it. So just stay underneath that. That's fine. The other thing is it allows you to phase it out. So you can actually test out demand without having to build on 4 acres. You can build on 1 acre, right? Build a little 10,000 square foot building. If that does well, build a second 10,000 square foot building. If that does well, do it 2 more times. All right. Now, if you wanted to get a little more scientific about it, how do you actually assess demand for small industrial space? Call every single industrial broker in the area and interview them. Ask them the questions. How many tenants are you working with that can't find the space? How often are you getting space like this leased? How quickly do you see this stuff moving in the market? What's it renting for? Figure it out, because those brokers will have all of that information for you. The other thing that you could do is just survey the market yourself. Go and look at all of the other industrial assets that are out there and see what is available, what is not, what is it renting for. You know, you can kind of just look on LoopNet or drive your market and see. You know, if you live anywhere that has a population of 10 to 20,000 or more, sometimes even less, honestly, like, you know, it depends on if it's in the shadow of a bigger metropolitan area. You could go with less. I mean, because flex space, you can go further out into the country. You know, these tenants don't really want to pay for being in the middle of everything. They really want to be where it's convenient, right? So off the interstate, 20 minutes outside of the city, totally fine with them because it's going to be affordable and it gives them strong access. So that's what I would do. A couple of different ways of assessing demand for small bay industrial space. SA is saying, yeah, demand is high. It's been higher and lower. Problem is getting a high quality tenant. I actually disagree with that. You can find a lot of high quality tenants when it comes to flex space. Now, if you're saying high quality as in a national credit tenant, well, yeah, of course, you're going to have a very hard time finding a national credit tenant that's going to take 1,500 to 2,000 square feet. That just doesn't work like that. These spaces are designed for small businesses, startups, entrepreneurs. They're great little spaces. And the good thing is they're flexible. It's so easy for you to backfill this space. If a tenant ever, defaults on their lease, to me, it's just like, hey, just get out. Give me the keys, walk away. I don't want to take you to court and try and get whatever remains in the lease. It's just not worth it. You're not going to get anything out of it. Might as well just get the keys back. That's the best thing that you could possibly do because there's so many tenants that want to take this stuff. I'm telling you. If you're just saying problem is getting a high quality tenant with the small business tenants, well then I would say you're not vetting your tenants properly. Keep in mind, as commercial real estate landlords, we can ask for practically anything that we want as we're going through the vetting process. Right? That's the beauty of commercial real estate. There are no Fair Housing Act rules and regulations. All right. So I can ask for your mother's blood type if I really want to. But typically what I ask for is 2 to 3 years of tax returns for the business, a personal financial statement from anybody that owns 10% of the business or more, and that's typically enough, right? Now, if that doesn't look good, then I want to see personal tax returns for anybody that owns 10% or more, right? So now we're getting from the business to the partners. I might want to start looking at bank statements. I can request anything and everything, right? I could even say, I don't feel really comfortable with your use. I need 3 months of a security deposit, right? There's so many ways for you to skin that cat. It's great. KVG is saying, if you're looking to start a business in the economy right now, you have a good amount of cash set to the side. Would you lease in this environment when the lease could drop more, or would you buy? KVG, I am not a business advisor. I'm an entrepreneur. I do a lot of stuff on the business side of things, but we talk about commercial real estate on this channel. Unfortunately, I probably wouldn't be the best person to give you advice there. Let's see. Maritime is saying, good morning, all. Thanks for sharing from Nova Scotia. Absolutely. Good to see you, Maritime. Thanks for joining us from Canada. All right. Let's see here. Always has Atomic Goat. I love people's names on Reddit. I think it's so hilarious. Always has been, plus little new supply. Yep, that's the case. Neo Commercial is saying, yeah, this is big in Northeast Ohio too. The Rust Belt is still the Rust Belt, but in a good way. Not a lot of supply, most likely due to building costs. I'm advising clients to go bigger and deal with it, or ask for a sublease clause in the lease. There's a lot of demand for these types of deals. That's the fun part about it. We've got multiple videos on this channel that go into flex space, small bay industrial. I'm pretty sure, I've even said it's like the easiest commercial real estate for beginners to jump into, because it's so flexible. When I work with a lot of newer commercial real estate investors, right? We work with, plenty of family offices, but, people that are transitioning out of, owning 80 single family homes or 5 single family homes, or, even hundreds of apartment units, getting into commercial. One of the first things that they ask is, well, how do I find tenants for this? Like, how do I make sure that the property that I'm buying is actually going to be able to be leased? Because that's the one thing that scares them, right? Coming from the multifamily world, you think, oh, well, everybody has to have a place to lay their head at night. Well, here's the thing. Yeah, maybe that's pretty secure, but at the end of the day, people will move back in with other family members if they have to, right? So I don't really necessarily play into that. People that are renting for a reason, right? There's a reason that they don't own. So to me, having professional business tenants is substantially better than anything you could ever get on the single or multifamily side. But with it being as popular as it is now, here's the thing. Trying to rent commercial space is not that difficult when you're buying a product like this or building a product like this that can house a variety of types of uses. That's what you want to keep in mind. You want to give yourself the most opportunities for hitting the target. Well, if you're new to commercial real estate, flex space, small bay industrial is a great way of going about doing that. Because like I said earlier, you can house everything from, an electrician to a woodworking shop to a podcast studio to pickleball, right? That's pretty wild, and all of them will be equally happy in that space. So, when you're going through that, lots of commercial brokers can help you find tenants. These tenants are also driving around looking for that space. You'd be amazed at how many of these tenants will look for commercial space on Craigslist, right? We've gotten some great tenants off of that. Now, you do have to qualify them just like any other tenant. I've gotten phenomenal tenants from that. Old Ice is saying, absolutely on fire. I cover Chicagoland. Aggressive capital from out of state is seeing basis at 33 to 50% of what it is in coastal markets and flooding the Midwest with capital these days. Weekly, we get inbound calls and emails asking for shallow bay deals in the Midwest. You honestly can't build them fast enough. It typically costs you about $120 to $130 a foot all in to build them. Right, that's including the land. Should be. So, let's see. It's all about rec users for me. 6,000 square feet of flex, and it is nearly constant inquiries. Research what's happened with small bay rents in the greater Toronto area in the last 5 years or so. Some tenants had their rents double on their renewals. That's the other thing. Like, man, you start talking about, these historic increases of rent at 3%. Well, if you happen to have the only supply and in a market where there is a substantial amount of demand, 3%'s out the window, There's going to be tenants that are willing to pay substantially more just so that they can have that space. Because you got to think, like, a lot of these types of users, they don't really have other options. I mean, their other option is working from their garage, which is miserable, by the way, especially if you have a ton of product. Like, let's say you're an e-commerce startup and you're doing some light assembly and then shipping everything out. Well, doing that out of your garage is awful. Like, it's cool when you're first, when you're a startup, and it's exciting when it's first getting going. I've worked with a lot of businesses over the years where they just get so burnt out, right? Like, your spouse is telling you, get that out of the house. I can't deal with it anymore. I want my garage back, or I want my living room back, whatever it is. So they got to go somewhere. And the nice thing about flex space, it typically has more power. It has, roll-up doors. I mean, we're talking about, it's just substantially easier access, like spaces that are actually designed for that use, right? Who would have thought? Advanced is saying lots of entrepreneurs want to start a business, but not everything can be run out of your house. Oh, that's funny. That's literally what I was just making the point of. Let's see. KVG saying another way I could form the question could be, in commercial real estate, does lease price get hit the hardest, or does property value, and which would usually bottom first? I mean, in this market, I would say it's probably going to be, typically, like, your price per square foot on the purchase is what gets hit first. Lease rates don't typically move as quickly. Now this is coming from Nashville. Nashville's in a bubble, and it always has been. It probably always will be. Nashville's just different, man. I mean, I see, you'll see rents drop, but it's pretty rare. They may flatten out for a little bit like they did for, a year or so here, but that's not bad when we're seeing 4, 5, 8, 10% year over year rent growth in this market, which is pretty just outstanding. So I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I don't know what you would do with that data, whether, leasing prices go lower first, or purchase prices. But as investors, I mean, you'd want to be purchasing whenever the price is lowest. First sign of an expanding economy. That's what Twistable is saying. Maybe they mean expanding. Oh, interesting. This guy is saying Denver is seeing the opposite. Lots of supply. Took over a year to lease 5,000 square foot unit. Yep, overbuilt and still a bit overpriced. I have a client about to close on a new build in Centennial. The units are selling slow, and the developer cut prices like 25% on the large units with pre-built mezzanines. Okay, so what I will say is that once you get up to 5,000 square feet, I know that is still technically small bay industrial, but that gets into a different type of tenant. Think about how many people actually occupy 5,000 square feet. Far fewer than how many people probably occupy 2,000 square feet, right? So I would rather take that 5,000 square foot unit, cut it up into 2 or 3 units, right? And it would probably have leased up far quicker than a year. So it's always important to take it with a grain of salt, because the bigger you go, the tougher it's going to be to fill. And there's also this kind of like no man's land gap between, like, I would almost say, 5 to 10,000 up to maybe 30 or 50, where it's just like, how do you find those tenants? How do you deal with them? Because like 50,000 plus, now you're dealing with bigger distribution facilities, right? And all that makes sense. And maybe it's just the arena of commercial real estate that I have played in for the last 12 years. But I prefer to just deal with smaller tenants, because you can sign those leases so much faster. We underwrote a deal yesterday for 30 days, or 30 deals in 30 days. If you guys have not been joining that, you've got to check it out. We're going to be ending it this week. We're on the last few days of underwriting. But we underwrote a deal yesterday where I showed that if you drop the price and you lease it up a lot faster, the numbers actually look about the same. So why take the risk of waiting to get a higher rental rate just because you want that? And who knows how long that'll sit on the market if you could just drop it a little bit and lease it very quickly. Like, that's my strategy whenever I do these. We might sign shorter term leases whenever we're working on a new asset, maybe 12 to 24 months. I did this with a wash. We signed 1-year leases on the wash because I wanted to see where it went. And then we ended up signing, I think, 5 years after that, 3 years or 5 years after that. because you just don't know. I wanted to get it leased up quickly because that to me means that I'm not going to have to pay a single month of my mortgage out of pocket, right? Which again, like you saw, we ran the numbers earlier. If you miss 2 months of rent collection on a 60-month lease, you might as well have just paid three. You've lost 3%. Might as well have paid a broker to bring you a better tenant, right? So all of that stuff really matters and adds up. KVG saying, I'm in Kentucky. You're right around the corner. The only couple of states growing right now. Yeah, there's a lot in the Southeast that's happening. It's really interesting to see. It's fun. So I appreciate it. Kevin is saying, wait, hey, Tyler, you said you'll be seeing us twice today. Is that for office hours and day 27 underwriting, or is that for 2 days, days 27 and 28 underwriting? We are doing days 27 and 28 underwriting today. I was out on Sunday, so I didn't go live technically 30 days in a row. I was out Sunday. I decided I needed a break after traveling all that way back from Mexico. That was kind of a pain in the butt. So, yeah. I mean, look, flex space, high in demand. You guys, if you're not seriously considering it, you've got to be looking into it. I've got a ton of videos on this channel teaching you how to do that stuff. And if it's of interest, jump into office hours. Ask me all the questions that you have about it. I'm happy to dive into it. It's a very interesting asset class. I think it's incredibly approachable, regardless of what your experience is in commercial real estate. It's relatively affordable. I mean, you can build a 10,000 square foot building for like 1.3 million, 1.2 to 1.3, depending on how nice you want it to be, right? I mean, talk about like where can you go get a 10,000 square foot building with 4 or 5 tenants for 1.3 million? That's pretty tough. Billy is saying, is a 60-acre land purchase in Memphis a good purchase? Has plenty of road access. Billy, unfortunately, I don't have enough context on that. Like if it's 60 acres in downtown Memphis, I would say maybe. It depends on the price. If it's 60 acres outside of Memphis, I would say maybe. It depends on the price. So, if somebody's offering you 60 acres for $1, I would say, well, yeah, I mean, you should probably buy that. It's a pretty good deal as long as, you're not going to hit with like an insane amount of taxes or something like that. But that's the tough part about commercial real estate. I mean, it's like saying, hey, is it good to buy a car? Well, I mean, yeah. Do you have to drive to work? Because if you have to drive to work, you might want to own a car. What kind of car do you need? What kind of work do you do? What does all of that look like? Because all of that starts to add up, and then I can tell you kind of what kind of car would be good for you to buy. It's the same thing on this. He's saying it's $200K. Yeah, Billy, unfortunately, I don't have enough knowledge around that deal, so I wouldn't be able to give you good advice there. Kevin is saying, how expensive would it be to convert small bays into 4 to 6 units in a 10,000 square foot building? Not too expensive, actually. I love doing those little conversions. I would say probably somewhere between $10 and $15 a foot, maybe upwards of $20 a foot, depending on the construction of the building, what's currently inside, what you've got to kind of work with. But really, at the end of the day, if you think about it, like if it's a 10,000 square foot building, all you have to do is run walls, put restrooms in, and then run mechanicals, like run all your MEP. Right, so oftentimes they're relatively easy to convert. It's all just a matter of money, baby. Ted is saying a 3,200 square foot building just sold in my area for $600,000. That's really cheap. Oh no, it's not $200 a foot. I have a building with 5 3,200 square foot spaces. Do you feel turning my building into condos could be profitable? Yeah, I mean, it certainly could be. The thing that I have a problem, like I love commercial condos. I've sold a ton of commercial condos in Nashville. In fact, I've come in and helped developers that couldn't sell their retail, turn them into condos and, send them right out the door because people love them. But it's a very specific buyer, right? There has to be a very good reason as to why someone would do that, right? Like if a 3,200 square foot standalone building with land sold for $600, you're going to have to offer a substantial discount on your 3,200 square foot spaces because they're condos. You're having to share. You've got it's not called an HOA. It's like a building owners management association, a BOMA, or you can call them, I forgot. There's like several different names for it, but you get the point. A commercial HOA, and people hate HOAs, right? I mean, they're just the bane of most real estate investors' existence. So it could be profitable, Ted. I mean, what I would do is I would talk to commercial real estate brokers in the area, see if there would be demand for that type of use, And if so, it couldn't hurt to maybe go try and get some pre-sales, right? See what could happen before you actually go through the full conversion process. That's it for office hours this week, guys. Appreciate you joining me. Every Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. We're going live. We're talking about commercial real estate. I'm sharing, what I'm finding, what I'm seeing out there in the market. That way you guys can be better commercial real estate investors. And you get to ask your questions. So jump in, ask me whatever you got. Go out there, find some flex space, bring it to me next week. Let's dive into it. Cheers. Thank y'all. I'll see y'all then. This episode of the Commercial Real Estate Investor Podcast is brought to you by my CRE Accelerator mastermind, where you'll get access to my step-by-step investment blueprint, essentially a library of resources on how to invest in commercial real estate. You'll get connected to a supportive community of other commercial real estate investors that are doing projects just like you. You'll get personalized coaching and feedback from me every step of the way. Go to www.crecentral.com to learn more.